father caught his children doing this in the bedroom. Moments later, he could not stop crying. Daniel Carter stared at the stack of unpaid bills scattered across his kitchen table, his weathered hands trembling as he reached for yet another envelope marked, "Final Notice," in bold red letters. The dim light of his laptop screen cast shadows across his face, highlighting the deep, worry lines that seemed to have aged him a decade in just the past few months. At 42, he felt like he was carrying the weight of the world on his shoulders. Upstairs, his 3 children slept peacefully, unaware of the storm brewing in their father's heart. Jake, his 14-year-old son, who reminded him so much of Sarah with those same determined eyes. Emma, 12, with her mother's gentle spirit and endless curiosity. And little Lily, just 8, who still asked about mommy sometimes, too young to fully understand why she wasn't coming back. Sarah. The thought of his late wife sent a familiar ache through his chest. She would have known what to do in this situation. She always did. But she wasn't here anymore, and Daniel was left to navigate this maze of financial uncertainty alone. The termination letter from Marshall and Associates lay crumpled in the trash, but its words still burned in his mind. Due to company-wide restructuring, position has been eliminated, 2 weeks severance. After 15 years of dedication, that's all it had amounted to. A letter and a pat on the back. Daniel pulled up his banking app, the numbers glaring back at him like accusatory eyes. $847.62, that's all that remained in their checking account. The mortgage payment was due next week, and after that, there would barely be enough for groceries, let alone utilities. He'd already dipped into their emergency savings, the ones Sarah had insisted they maintain. That too was nearly depleted. Running his fingers through his graying hair, Daniel glanced at the family photo hanging on the wall. It was taken just months before Sarah's diagnosis, during their last summer vacation at the beach. They all looked so happy, so blissfully unaware of what lay ahead. Sarah's absence felt particularly heavy tonight, like a ghost hovering over his shoulder, witnessing his failure to provide for their children. A creaking floorboard from upstairs made him hastily gather the bills, shoving them into a drawer. He'd gotten good at this dance, hiding the worry, masking the fear, maintaining a facade of normalcy for his children's sake. They didn't need to know about the countless nights he spent applying for jobs, the dozens of rejection emails, or the growing mountain of debt threatening to avalanche over their lives. "Dad?" Emma's voice floated down the stairs. "Are you still awake?" Daniel quickly closed his laptop, forcing a smile into his voice. "Just finishing up some work, sweetheart. You should be asleep." "I heard noises," she said, appearing at the kitchen doorway in her favorite pajamas, the ones with little books printed all over them. Sarah had bought those for her last Christmas. "Just getting a glass of water." He lied smoothly, reaching for a glass to make his story convincing. "Everything's fine. Go back to bed." Emma hesitated, her eyes scanning his face with an awareness that sometimes unnerved him. She was so much like her mother, perceptive, caring, always trying to read between the lines. For a moment, Daniel feared she could see right through him, see the desperate calculations running through his mind, the mounting anxiety about their future. "Are you sure you're okay, Dad?" she asked, her voice small but steady. Daniel crossed the kitchen and pulled her into a hug, planting a kiss on top of her head. "I'm perfect, Emmy. Just perfect. Now back to bed before you wake up Jake and Lily." As he watched her climb back upstairs, Daniel felt the familiar guilt gnawing at his conscience. How many more lies would he have to tell? How much longer could he shield them from the harsh reality of their situation? Late into the night, after he was certain the children were asleep, Daniel allowed himself a moment of vulnerability. Sitting in the darkness of his kitchen, he buried his face in his hands and let out a shaky breath. "I don't know what to do, Sarah," he whispered to the empty room. "I don't know how to fix this." Unknown to him, 3 pairs of young ears strained to catch his words through the heating vent, their hearts heavy with a concern they weren't supposed to feel. Jake held Lily's hand as she tried to understand why their daddy sounded so sad. Emma clutched her diary, where she'd been keeping track of all the little signs she noticed: the cheaper groceries, the cancelled cable subscription, The way their father would say he'd already eaten when there wasn't quite enough food for everyone at dinner. Daniel's whispered prayers continued in the kitchen below. Please give me strength. Please help me find a way. They can't know how bad things are. They've lost enough already. But as the Carter children lay awake in their beds that night, each lost in their own thoughts, they were already forming a plan. Their father had always been their protector, their hero, their rock. Now, perhaps, it was their turn to be strong for him. They just had to figure out how to help without letting him know they knew about his struggles. As dawn approached, Daniel finally trudged up to his room, exhausted but determined. Tomorrow would be another day of pretending, another day of shielding his children from the harsh realities of their circumstances. Another day of job applications, of stretching dollars, of maintaining the illusion that everything was fine. Little did he know, his children were about to embark on their own journey of sacrifice, one that would eventually break his heart and reshape their family's understanding of love and support in ways he could never have imagined. The morning sun hadn't yet risen when Jake Carter called his first sibling council meeting. He'd spent the entire night thinking about their father's muffled sobs, and as the eldest, he felt responsible for taking action. Emma and Lily huddled with him in the corner of their shared bedroom, their voices barely above whispers. We have to do something, Jake declared, his teenage face unusually serious. Dad needs help, even if he won't admit it. Emma nodded, clutching her worn copy of Little Women, one of the few books she had left from her once extensive collection. But how? We're just kids. Lily, still in her unicorn pajamas, raised her small hand like she was in class. I have $3.20 in my piggy bank, she announced proudly. Jake and Emma exchanged a look that held both love for their little sister's innocence and the weight of understanding that $3 wouldn't solve their problems. But Lily's offer sparked something in Jake's mind. What if we could save money without Dad knowing? He suggested, his voice dropping even lower. We each get lunch money every day. What if we didn't use it? Emma's eyes widened. You mean skip lunch? Not exactly skip, Jake explained, though that's precisely what he meant. We could say we ate, but save the money instead. It's $5 each per day, that's $15 we could save. Lily's bottom lip trembled. But I get hungry at lunchtime. Emma pulled her little sister close. We all will, Lils. But remember how Dad pretends he's not hungry at dinner sometimes? So we can have more? Maybe we can be brave like him. The plan started small, but grew rapidly. Emma, inspired by Jake's initiative, began cataloging her belongings. Her bookshelf, once packed with beloved stories, slowly began to empty as she sold volumes online through a secret account she created. Each sale felt like giving away a piece of her heart, but she reminded herself that her father's peace of mind was worth more than any book. Jake's contribution went beyond lunch money. He began rising before dawn, sneaking out to Mr. Peterson's house down the street. The elderly neighbor had mentioned needing help with yard work, and Jake negotiated a deal: $20 for mowing the lawn and cleaning gutters. Soon, other neighbors noticed his work ethic, and more jobs followed. While his friends spent afternoons playing video games, Jake was raking leaves, washing cars, and doing any odd job he could find. Lily, the youngest, found her own ways to contribute. During meals, she developed what she called her special eating strategy, pushing food around her plate to make it look like she'd eaten more than she had, ensuring there were always leftovers for their father. She became an expert at making her school supplies last longer, using every inch of her pencils and making her notebooks stretch by writing smaller. The sacrifices weren't easy. Emma's stomach would growl during afternoon classes, and she'd press her hand against it, trying to muffle the sound. Jake's muscles ached from manual labor he wasn't used to, and sometimes he'd fall asleep during homework. Lily would stare longingly at her friends' lunch trays, full of food she pretended she wasn't interested in. But they maintained their secret with fierce determination. They created a hidden space in Emma's old dollhouse where they stored their saved money, wrapped in old socks to keep it from rattling. Every night, they'd count their growing collection, proud of each dollar they managed to save. The hardest part wasn't the hunger or the extra work it was maintaining the facade of normalcy. When their father asked about their day, they had to remember their rehearsed stories about school lunches they never ate. When he noticed Emma's missing books, she claimed she'd loaned them to friends. Jake explained his exhaustion as extra soccer practice, and Lily became surprisingly good at changing the subject whenever food came up. One particularly difficult afternoon, Emma found Lily crying in their bedroom closet, clutching her beloved teddy bear, Mr. Snuggles. "What's wrong, Lils?" Emma asked, though she already knew the answer. "I'm going to sell Mr. Snuggles," Lily sniffled. "He's worth money, and Dad needs money more than I need a stuffed animal." Emma's heart clenched. Mr. Snuggles had been a gift from their mother, one of the last things she'd given Lily before she passed away. "No, Lily," Emma said firmly. "Some things we keep. Mom would want you to keep Mr. Snuggles." But the next day, when Emma checked their money sock, she found an extra $20 and noticed Mr. Snuggles was missing from Lily's bed. She never asked where the money came from, but that night she held her little sister extra tight as they fell asleep. Their sacrifice fund grew steadily, but so did the toll it took on them. Dark circles appeared under Jake's eyes from his early morning jobs. Emma's typically pristine homework began showing signs of distraction. Hunger made it hard to focus. Lily, usually bouncing with energy, became quieter, conserving her strength through the long school days without lunch. Yet they never complained, not even to each other. Every time one of them felt weak or wanted to give up, they'd remember their father's late-night sighs, his worried expressions when he thought they weren't looking, the way he'd skip meals so they could eat more. Their love for him fueled their determination, pushing them through hunger pangs and exhaustion. As weeks passed, their secret operation became more sophisticated. Jake created a spreadsheet to track their earnings and savings. Emma researched the best prices for selling used books and toys online. Even Lily developed a system for redistributing her food at dinner that looked completely natural. They were learning lessons no child should have to learn about sacrifice, about silent strength, about the weight of adult worries. But they were also discovering something profound about themselves and each other. In their shared secret, they found a new kind of strength, a deeper bond as siblings united in their mission to help their father. What they didn't realize was that their carefully maintained facade was beginning to show cracks. Small changes in their behavior, missing possessions, and altered eating habits were leaving breadcrumbs that would eventually lead their father to a discovery that would break his heart and change their family forever. It started with a phone call from Mrs. Thompson, Emma's English teacher. Daniel was sorting through another batch of rejection emails when his phone buzzed. "Mr. Carter? I'm concerned about Emma." Mrs. Thompson's voice carried a note of worry that made Daniel's heart skip. "She fell asleep in class today, and when I woke her, she seemed disoriented. She mentioned she was just a little hungry, but this isn't the first time." The conversation replayed in Daniel's mind as he stood in Emma's doorway that evening, watching her do homework. Had she lost weight? Her favorite sweater seemed looser than before. When was the last time he'd seen her reading for pleasure? The bookshelf that had once overflowed now stood half empty, gaps like missing teeth where her favorite series had been. "Just reorganizing," Emma had said when he'd asked about the missing books last week. But now, studying the shelf more carefully, he noticed the carefully arranged remaining volumes seemed to be hiding the empty spaces behind them. His suspicions grew when he found Jake's baseball glove missing from the garage. The same glove Sarah had saved for months to buy him, the one he'd sworn he'd never part with. When questioned, Jake mumbled something about leaving it at school, but Daniel had noticed his son's hands were calloused in new places, as if from work rather than baseball. The real wake-up call came during dinner preparations. Daniel was reaching for Lily's favorite cereal when he realized the box felt too light. Opening it, he found it nearly empty, yet positioned precisely to appear full from the outside. A quick check of other boxes revealed the same pattern, food containers strategically arranged to hide their depleted contents. That night, unable to sleep, Daniel began a systematic search of the house. In Jake's closet, he found a crumpled timesheet from Mr. Peterson, forgotten in a pocket. Emma's laptop history, not completely cleared, showed visits to online marketplaces and shipping labels. But it was what he discovered under Lily's bed that broke him, a small notebook where she'd been practicing writing. "I'm not hungry." In different ways, complete with smiling faces she'd apparently been using to convince him she was fine with smaller portions. The pieces started falling into place like a terrible puzzle. The children's recent preference for eating breakfast at school. Their insistence on packing their own lunches. The way they'd become experts at pushing food around their plates to make it look eaten. Daniel's hands trembled as he pulled out his phone and opened the school's parent portal. His password revealed weeks of unused lunch account balances. Not a single purchase had been made in over a month. A memory surfaced, Lily whispering to Emma in the hallway yesterday. "I'm so hungry, but we can't spend the lunch money. Daddy needs it more." He dismissed it as passing childhood chatter, but now, in Emma's room, he found her diary tucked beneath her mattress. He never invaded her privacy before, but fear drove him to open it. Inside, detailed calculations tracked the money they'd been saving: lunch money, online sales, neighborhood jobs. The total made his knees weak, over $600. Next to the number, Emma had written, "For Dad's bills." Maybe this will help him smile again. The final revelation came when he discovered their hiding place: Emma's old dollhouse. Behind the miniature sofa, wrapped in worn socks, lay their accumulated savings. Carefully folded bills, loose change, even a few crumpled dollars that looked like they'd been retrieved from the washing machine. Daniel sat heavily on Emma's bed, the evidence of his children's sacrifice spread around him like accusations. The missing baseball glove that had funded 2 weeks of lunches. Emma's beloved books, sold one by one to strangers. Lily's teddy bear Mr. Snuggles, the last gift from Sarah, gone from its usual place of honor on her pillow. His mind raced back through the past weeks, seeing everything in a new light. Jake's exhaustion wasn't from sports he'd been working before school. Emma's quiet afternoons weren't spent studying at the library she'd been selling their possessions online. And Lily, his baby girl, had been teaching herself to go hungry with a smile. The signs had been there all along. The children's new habit of gathering in whispered conferences that fell silent when he approached. The mysterious disappearance of their possessions, explained away with increasingly creative excuses. Their sudden interest in helping with the grocery shopping, carefully steering him toward the cheapest options. In the kitchen, Daniel found himself opening cupboards and the refrigerator, really looking this time. He noticed how the food was arranged to appear more plentiful than it was, how careful portioning made meager supplies last longer. His children hadn't just been going hungry, they'd developed an entire system to hide their sacrifices from him. A noise from the hallway caught his attention. Through the crack in the door, he could see his children in another of their secret meetings. Jake was counting something, probably more saved lunch money. Emma was consoling Lily, who looked tired and pale. "Just a little longer," Jake was saying. "We've almost got enough to help Dad with the bills." "But I miss Mr. Snuggles," Lily whispered, her voice trembling. "I know, Lils," Emma soothed. "But remember how Dad always says we have to be strong?" Daniel's heart shattered. His children, who had already lost their mother, were now sacrificing their childhoods piece by piece, all to help him. They were going hungry, selling their treasured possessions, working in secret, and all while maintaining a brave face so he wouldn't worry. The weight of their love and sacrifice pressed against his chest until he could hardly breathe. His attempts to protect them had backfired spectacularly, driving them to protect him instead, at a cost no child should have to pay. Tomorrow, he decided, this would end. He would confront them, stop this silent martyrdom before it went any further. But tonight, he needed to process the depth of what his children had done, and find the words to address both their incredible love and their heartbreaking sacrifice. As he stood in the darkened kitchen, his children's whispered conference continuing upstairs, Daniel realized that the time for pretense was over. Tomorrow would bring a conversation that would change everything, but first, he had to figure out how to face the magnitude of his children's silent battle to save him. The next evening arrived with the weight of storm clouds. Daniel had spent the entire day rehearsing what he would say, how he would approach this delicate situation. But when he heard his children's familiar whispered conference coming from upstairs, all his carefully planned words evaporated. He took the stairs two at a time, their saved money clutched in his hand, his heart pounding against his ribs. Without knocking, he pushed open the bedroom door, startling his 3 children who were huddled around Emma's old dollhouse. "Dad!" Jake scrambled to his feet, instinctively moving to shield his sisters. "We were just—" "Stop," Daniel's voice cracked. "No more lies. No more pretending." He held up the money-filled socks. "I found this. I know everything." The room fell into a silence so profound they could hear the neighbors' wind chimes through the closed window. Emma's face went pale, while Lily burst into tears, burying her face in her sister's sleeve. "Where's your baseball glove, Jake?" Daniel asked, his voice gentle but firm. "The one your mother bought you." Jake's shoulders slumped. "I sold it to Tommy's dad," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "He gave me $50 for it." "And your books, Emma? The ones you said you loaned to friends?" Emma's chin trembled. "I sold them online. People pay good money for complete series sets." "And you, Lily?" Daniel knelt before his youngest. "Want to tell me why you've been practicing writing 'I'm not hungry' in your notebook?" Lily's sobs grew louder. "Because I was hungry," she wailed. "I was so hungry at school, Daddy, but I didn't want to make you sad." The dam broke. Words poured out of them like a flood, confessions about skipped lunches, early morning jobs, sold possessions. They spoke over each other, each revelation more heartbreaking than the last. "We heard you crying at night," Jake explained, his teenage composure crumbling. "We couldn't just do nothing. I checked the mail before you every day," Emma added, "to hide the bills with red stamps on them. I made my portion smaller." Lily hiccuped between sobs. "So you could eat more. Like you do for us." Daniel felt his knees give way, and he sank onto Emma's bed. "Come here." He opened his arms, and his children fell into them, a tangle of tears and trembling bodies. "My brave, foolish, wonderful children. We just wanted to help." Jake's voice broke. "You work so hard, Dad. You skip meals so we can eat. You never buy anything for yourself. But that's my job." Daniel's voice was hoarse with emotion. "I'm the parent. I'm supposed to protect you, not the other way around. But we're a family," Emma insisted, her eyes shining with tears. "Mom always said families help each other." The mention of Sarah sent a fresh wave of grief through the room. Daniel could almost feel her presence, could imagine her heart breaking at the sight of their children going hungry, selling their treasured possessions. "I found a good deal from Mr. Snuggles," Lily confessed quietly. "The lady said her daughter would love him. But I miss him so much, Daddy. He still smelled like Mommy's perfume." Daniel pulled Lily closer, his tears falling into her hair. "Oh, sweetheart. You shouldn't have had to give him up. None of you should have had to give up anything. But we wanted to," Jake protested. "We're not babies anymore, Dad. We understand about money and bills and jobs. We see how tired you are," Emma added. "How worried. We just wanted to make things better." Daniel looked at his children, really looked at them. They were thinner, tired, their eyes too old for their young faces. They had been carrying adult burdens while he was too busy trying to shield them to notice their suffering. "I'm so sorry," he whispered. "I thought I was protecting you by hiding our problems. Instead, I made you feel like you had to protect me. Are you mad at us?" Lily asked in a small voice. "Mad?" Daniel gave a watery laugh. "I'm heartbroken that you've been hungry and scared. I'm devastated that you felt you had to sell your precious things. But mad? Never. I'm in awe of your love, your courage, your sacrifice. But this ends now." "But Dad," Jake started to protest. "No," Daniel's voice was firm. "Tomorrow, we're going to have proper breakfast together. You're all going to eat lunch at school. No more skipping meals, no more selling your belongings, no more secret jobs." "What about the bills?" Emma asked quietly. Daniel took a deep breath. "We're going to face them together, as a family. No more secrets. No more pretending everything's fine when it isn't. Your mother would want us to be honest with each other. She would be proud of us, wouldn't she? Lily asked, wiping her eyes. For being strong? Oh, baby. Daniel kissed her forehead. She would be so proud. But she would also tell us that being strong doesn't mean we have to suffer in silence. Sometimes being strong means asking for help. They sat together on Emma's bed, holding each other, letting tears fall freely. Years of pent-up grief, worry, and love poured out in that embrace. As the sun set outside their window, casting long shadows across the room, Daniel realized that while he had failed to protect his children from hardship, he had succeeded in raising children with hearts so big they would sacrifice everything to help him. I love you, he told them, his voice thick with emotion. All of you. More than you could ever know. We love you too, Dad. They responded in unison, their voices strengthened by the relief of finally having everything in the open. As they held each other in the growing darkness, Daniel made a silent vow. Tomorrow would be different. Tomorrow, they would face their challenges together, in the light, as a family. But tonight, they would simply hold each other, and heal from the weight of secrets too heavy for any of them to have carried alone. The morning after the confrontation, Daniel sat at his kitchen table staring at his phone. The number displayed on the screen belonged to Michael Roberts, his old college roommate and current CEO of a successful software company. They'd drifted apart over the years, occasional holiday cards their only connection, but Michael had always told Daniel to call if he ever needed anything. Pride had kept Daniel from making that call. The same pride that had blinded him to his children's suffering. But as he looked at the cereal boxes arranged to hide their emptiness, at the calendar marked with unpaid bill due dates, he realized pride was a luxury his family couldn't afford anymore. His finger hovered over the call button when a knock at the door startled him. Opening it, he found Mr. Peterson, Jake's elderly neighbor-turned-employer, standing on his porch. "Morning, Daniel," the old man said, his weathered face creased with concern. "Think we need to talk about that boy of yours." Daniel's heart sank, expecting complaints about Jake's work. Instead, Mr. Peterson's eyes filled with tears. "That child's been showing up at dawn, working harder than men twice his age." Mr. Peterson's voice wavered. "Yesterday, I caught him nearly falling asleep while cleaning my gutters. When I tried to give him lunch, he said he wasn't hungry, but his hands were shaking." The old man pulled out a worn leather wallet. "I've been putting aside the money I'd normally spend on professional landscaping. Your boys earn every penny of it, and then some." Before Daniel could protest, another voice called from the sidewalk. "Mr. Carter!" It was Mrs. Thompson, Emma's English teacher, carrying a familiar-looking box. "I believe these belong to Emma." Inside the box, Daniel recognized Emma's beloved books, the ones she'd sold online. "The school staff took up a collection," Mrs. Thompson explained. "We couldn't bear the thought of Emma without her books. Not after everything." More neighbors began appearing, each carrying something. Ms. Rodriguez from next door brought grocery bags full of food. The Patels from across the street carried containers of home-cooked meals. Mr. Wilson, the local bookstore owner, held a gift card for Emma. Even Tommy's dad showed up with Jake's baseball glove, insisting on returning it. "We're your neighbors, Daniel," Mr. Peterson said firmly. "We look out for each other. You should have told us you were struggling." Overwhelmed, Daniel watched as his kitchen filled with food, supplies, and caring faces. His children, drawn by the commotion, stood wide-eyed in the doorway. "Dad?" Jake's voice was uncertain. "What's happening?" Before Daniel could answer, his phone rang. Michael Roberts' name flashed on the screen. Taking a deep breath, Daniel answered. "Michael, Daniel Carter, you stubborn fool." Michael's voice was warm with concern. "Mrs. Thompson emailed me last night. Why didn't you tell me you were looking for work?" "I didn't want to impose." "Impose?" "Daniel, my company's been trying to fill a project manager position for months. Someone with exactly your experience and skills. The job's yours if you want it. Better salary than your old position, full benefits, and you can work remotely 3 days a week to be with your kids." Daniel had to sit down, his legs weak with relief. Around him, neighbors were organizing the kitchen, filling cupboards, sharing stories about his children's secret acts of kindness they'd witnessed over the past months. Mrs. Wilson, the school cafeteria manager, approached with tears in her eyes. "Those children of yours would sit in the cafeteria with empty trays, telling everyone they had big breakfasts. But I saw them eyeing others' food. It broke my heart. No more empty trays," Daniel promised, his voice firm. "No more skipped meals." The children watched in amazement as their kitchen transformed. Lily's eyes grew wide at the sight of real, fresh fruit. Emma couldn't stop touching her recovered books. Jake stood straighter when Mr. Peterson praised his work ethic to everyone. Then came the biggest surprise. Tommy's mother arrived, clutching something familiar, Mr. Snuggles, Lily's beloved teddy bear. "My daughter realized this bear meant something special when she found this inside." She held out a small note in Lily's handwriting. "Please take good care of Mr. Snuggles. He still smells like my mommy." Lily burst into tears, clutching her restored companion. The bear still carried traces of Sarah's perfume, a precious connection they'd almost lost to desperation. As the morning progressed, Daniel pulled his children aside. "I've been offered a new job," he told them. "A better one. And I've learned something important. We're not alone. We never were. I was just too proud to see it." "Does this mean we can eat lunch at school again?" Lily asked hopefully. Daniel hugged her close. "Yes, sweetheart. No more going hungry. No more selling precious things. No more secrets." The kitchen had become a hub of community support. Neighbors shared coffee and stories, arranged meal trains, and offered various forms of help. The Patels insisted on including the Carters in their weekly family dinners. Mrs. Thompson started a carpooling schedule to help with the kids' activities. For the first time in months, the family sat down to a proper meal together. The table was full, not just with food, but with hope. As Daniel watched his children eat without trying to save portions or hide their hunger, he felt a weight lift from his shoulders. "Your mother would be so proud of this community," he told his children. "She always said it takes a village." "She'd be proud of you too, Dad," Emma said softly. "For letting people help us." Jake nodded. "And for finally being honest with us." Looking around at the kitchen full of food, at his children's brightening faces, at the neighbors who had become family, Daniel realized that sometimes rock bottom becomes a foundation to build upon. Their struggle had revealed not just the depth of his children's love, but the strength of their community's compassion. As he helped himself to seconds, something he hadn't done in months, Daniel made a silent promise to Sarah. Their children would never go hungry again, would never have to sacrifice their childhood to adult worries. They would face whatever came next together, supported by the village of caring hearts that had gathered in their kitchen on this transformative morning. 3 months after that transformative morning in their kitchen, Daniel stood in the doorway of his children's bedroom, watching them sleep peacefully. The moonlight filtered through the window, illuminating their faces, faces that had regained their childhood fullness, no longer haunted by hidden hunger and worry. His new job at Michael's company had transformed their lives. The regular paycheck had steadied their financial ship, but it was the lessons learned during their struggles that had truly changed their family forever. On Emma's bookshelf, her restored collection stood proudly, joined by new volumes, gifts from neighbors and teachers who continued to look out for her. But among these books lay something even more precious, a journal where she now wrote stories about a family that grew stronger through adversity, rather than calculations of saved lunch money. Jake's baseball glove rested on his bedside table, well used from recent games. He'd kept his job with Mr. Peterson, not out of necessity now, but because he'd discovered a genuine love for the work and a deep friendship with the old man. They spent weekend afternoons together, Jake learning about gardening while Mr. Peterson shared stories of his own youth. Lily clutched Mr. Snuggles as she slept, the bear still carrying that faint trace of Sarah's perfume. But now, instead of hiding her hunger with practiced smiles, she'd become known for sharing her lunch with classmates who forgot theirs, understanding better than most the importance of making sure no one went hungry. Daniel moved quietly into the room, adjusting blankets and brushing hair from peaceful faces. His children had taught him something profound about love, that it wasn't just about sheltering others from hardship, but about allowing them to help carry the burden. Earlier that evening, they'd hosted their first proper dinner party. The house had buzzed with laughter as neighbors who'd helped them through their darkest times gathered around their table. The children had insisted on helping cook, proudly serving dishes they'd learned to make from Mrs. Patel during their weekly family dinners. During the party, Daniel had found himself in a quiet moment with Mrs. Thompson, who'd become a close family friend. "You know what amazes me most?" she'd said, watching the children interact with their guests. "They haven't let their hardship make them bitter. Instead, they've become more compassionate." She was right. Just last week, Jake had noticed a new student at school wearing worn-out shoes. Instead of keeping his first paycheck from his now part-time work with Mr. Peterson, he'd asked Daniel to help him buy the boy a new pair, remembering how it felt to need help but be afraid to ask. Emma had started a book-sharing program at school, ensuring that every student had access to stories, regardless of their ability to buy them. "Books were my escape," she'd explained. "Everyone deserves that comfort." Even little Lily had found her way to help others. She'd become the unofficial welcomer of new students, sharing her lunch with anyone who seemed lonely or hungry, her own experience having taught her to recognize the signs. As Daniel tucked the blanket around Lily's shoulders, she stirred slightly. "Daddy?" she mumbled sleepily. "Sure, princess. Go back to sleep." "Are you crying?" she asked, her small hand reaching up to touch his cheek. He hadn't realized there were tears on his face. "Happy tears," he assured her, kissing her forehead. "Very happy tears. Because we're okay now? Because we're more than okay. We're stronger than ever." From across the room, Jake's voice came softly through the darkness. "Dad? I thought you were asleep." "I was thinking about Mom," Jake said, sitting up in his bed. "Remember how she always said that love grows when you share it?" Emma stirred too, joining the conversation. "Like when you divide a plant and it makes two plants." Daniel smiled at the memory. Sarah had been an avid gardener, always sharing cuttings from her plants with neighbors. She was right. Our love grew stronger when we stopped trying to handle everything alone. And when we stopped keeping secrets, Lily added, fully awake now. "That's right," Daniel agreed, sitting on the edge of her bed. "We learned that being strong doesn't mean hiding our struggles. Sometimes, it means being brave enough to let others see when we're hurting. Like how Mr. Peterson pretends he needs help with his garden just so he can give Jake work?" Emma asked with a knowing smile. Jake threw a pillow at her. "He does not. I'm an excellent gardener." Their laughter filled the room, warm and genuine. It was a sound that had been too rare in their house for too long, but now it flowed freely and frequently. "You know what Mom would love most about now?" Daniel asked, gathering his children close. "Not that we're doing better with money, or that we have food in the cupboards. She'd love that we've learned to face things together, as a family. And that we help others too," Emma added. "Like she always did." Daniel nodded, his heart full. Sarah's spirit lived on in their children's kindness, in their instinct to help others even after their own struggles had eased. As they sat together in the moonlit room, Daniel realized that their ordeal had given them something precious, a deeper understanding of love's true nature. Love wasn't just about protection, it was about trust, honesty, and the courage to be vulnerable together. "Time for sleep," he finally said, helping Lily settle back under her covers. "We've got a big day tomorrow. Family pancake Saturday," Lily cheered softly. "With real maple syrup," Jake added with a grin. "And nobody has to pretend they're not hungry," Emma finished. As Daniel turned to leave their room, his heart so full it felt like it might burst, Lily's small voice called out one more time. "Daddy? I'm glad we don't have to be strong alone anymore." "Me too, sweetheart," he replied, his voice thick with emotion. "Me too." Standing in the hallway outside their room, Daniel allowed his tears to fall freely, tears not of sadness or worry, but of profound gratitude for the love that had carried them through their darkest times, and the lessons that had transformed their family forever. In the quiet of the night, he whispered to Sarah's memory, "They did it, my love. They showed me what real strength is. And now, together, we're finally learning to fly."